I'd like to call to order the December 5th, 2022 reorganization meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. If you could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, at this time, we will be electing a temporary president to preside over the reorganization meeting. Is there a nomination for a temporary president? Would someone?
I nominate Jackie Huff.
Is there a second? I second. Okay, are there any other nominations for temporary president? Is there a motion to close the nominations?
So moved.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Okay, the nominations are closed. Is there any discussion on the motion to elect Jackie Huff temporary president? Thank you, Jackie. Any public comment? Okay, all those in favor of electing Jackie Huff as temporary president say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No? Okay, Jackie, thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Is there a nomination for the office of the president?
I nominate Amber Concepcion.
Is there a second?
I second.
Is there any discussion? Is there another nomination for president? All right, is there a motion to close the nominations?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of closing the nominations, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The nominations are closed. Is there any public comment? All those in favor of electing Amber Concepcion as president, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Congratulations.
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks, everyone.
Is there a nomination for the vice president?
I nominate Gretchen Brandt.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? Is there another nomination for vice president? Is there a motion to close the nominations?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor of closing the nominations, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The nominations are closed. Is there any public comment? All those in favor of electing Gretchen Brandt as vice president, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Congratulations, Gretchen Brandt.
So then it's back to me.
Back to you.
All right, thank you, Jackie. And before we want to move on, I just want to recognize Amy Bader's years of service as vice president. She was serving in this role during some of the most difficult, challenging years our district has ever gone through. And she just had such a tireless perspective on keeping us focused on the science and the evidence as we worked through the pandemic and what was best for kids and what was best for employees and staff, and to do so from a perspective of what do we know and how we can use the knowledge we have in terms of science and evidence to keep us moving in the right direction. So also, from a personal perspective, like, she was incredibly supportive to me, and as many of you know, I had gone through some considerable health difficulties during the early part of the pandemic year in 2020, and Amy really picked up and was incredibly supportive throughout that entire ordeal. So thank you, Amy. Our next action item is annual appointments. This is in attachment 3A. Board members, if you could take a moment to review the rules provided in the attachment. And then I would like to request a motion to accept the appointments as listed on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion any concerns about what your, if anybody has anything they want to change with their appointments? Speak now. Yeah, okay.
Or you're stuck with it.
Well, at least till the next meeting. Any public comment? Okay, then we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff, she's not here. Ms. Sidney. Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Then moving forward to 2023 school board meeting dates. This was in attachment 3B. This is a list of the 2023 dates. These reflect the board's practice to meet on the first and third Monday of each month. Except where noted, meetings will continue to be held at 7 o'clock here in the boardroom of this building. And you may also notice attached to the agenda, we have a little bit more of a complete calendar that lists some of the other things going on in each month for the board and the community to be aware of what's on our calendars. Is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
No, I just would point out that on that additional sheet that you mentioned, there's just some explanations about why we may not be on a regular schedule for the month, and usually in observation of a particular holiday or religious observance or such. So,
Yeah, thank you.
yep. Just if people wonder why, they can figure out why.
There's good reasons if we're not. Yeah. Okay, any public comment on this? And then we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney. Yes. Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt. Yes. Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes. Okay, then, at this time, I would like to request a motion to adjourn the reorganization meeting.
So move. Go ahead, finish.
Oh, I'm sorry. And then we'll be taking a very brief break before we move on to our next meeting, so. Okay, so there was a motion and
Second.
Okay, all in favor of adjourning? Aye?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, then we are adjourned. And I think we're gonna get a quick picture. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, too bad we missed Jackie. She got a hug me.
It's been a long time in college.
The last time we had masks.
Listen, everyone picture.
Not sure how we managed to do this a couple of days a year without having to use this. Good thing you checked it before.
Next. Gretchen. Oh, God, I have to get glasses. When I got the prescription done today and everything. 2 weeks.
Okay. I'd like to call to order the December 5th, 2022 regular meeting of State College Area School District Board of Directors. I'd like to welcome everyone who's joining us in person this evening and those of you who are viewing remotely. The board held an executive session prior to this meeting on real estate, legal, and student discipline. Board members with an agenda before you, are there any changes to the agenda as presented? Okay, at this time, I will call on our board secretary for a roll call of board members present.
Dr. Anderson.
Here?
Dr. Bader.
Here.
Ms. Brandt.
Here.
Dr. Buck.
Here.
Ms. Concepcion.
Here.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yeah.
Dr. Duffy.
Here.
Ms. Zidney.
Here.
Okay, that has, well, so now we're moving on to the superintendent update. So I'll
Okay,
turn it
thank
over to Curtis.
All right, a new change. Starting in January, the board's committee and regular meeting structures will change. Regular meetings will continue to be held first and third Mondays of the month, but meetings will have a different agenda structure. During the first meeting, the board's finance, facilities and grounds, and culture and climate and learning committees will meet consecutively for up to 30 minutes each. Each committee will discuss no more than 2 items in the presence of the entire board. This will replace our present system of daytime committee meetings. After the committee discussions, the board will vote on routine items. The second regular board meeting, it will be as normal, no changes there. Our reasons for the restructure, the board committee and regular meetings were to first give all board members a chance to hear every committee discussion and offer input. Second, offer the public more access to committee meetings by holding them in the evening and having them broadcast live and archived in CNET. And third, free up senior administrators during the day to focus on school and stay more connected to them. Just as before, community members will have opportunities to comment during meetings. We believe this approach will serve board, administration, and the public better than our present system. And we look forward to introducing it in January, starting in January. Okay. So we'll be sending out emails and putting this information on our website that you can see as we go through this starting in January. Okay.
All right, thank you. Do we have any, well, Jackie's not here to give a legislative report. I don't think there is one, because we're kind of in a lull with the legislature anyways. Is there a COG report, Gretchen and Peter?
Yes, there is a COG report. I have one item, and then, Peter, did you have an update on the SPPA?
That's later on in the, we'll go through the presentation.
Oh, yeah, there's a whole, okay, so just one for now then. So a week ago today, the funding for the Whitehall Road project at the General Forum meeting was pulled entirely from the agenda because there was concern about a legal and/or personnel, excuse me, issue. And now, and that was in executive, the executive committee, and it was executive session, so I have no idea anything more than what I just said. But now, a meeting just in the past, I think, couple hours is scheduled. There's a special meeting day after tomorrow at noon, and the General Forum will meet presumably to tackle this funding issue again. And it's right around $578,000 in contingency that they would potentially on Wednesday vote to release. If they do that, then the project will continue. So we will find out Wednesday at noon what the outcome of that is. In terms of SCASD's representation on the Parks Authority, the Parks Authority is simply on pause with anything until that vote occurs to release those funds by the General Forum, or not. So this is just to be continued, but that is an update that will not change until Wednesday. So, and the SPPA is on the agenda for later. So
I have a question. So is the amount that they're voting on, or expected to vote on, in terms of approving for contingency funds, is that simply an amount that matches the existing change orders that have already accrued, or does it provide any further contingency beyond the change orders that have already been submitted?
So the,
I guess what I mean is like, if you get more change orders, are they gonna have to vote again?
yeah, and basically what happened, I'll try and answer quickly so that I don't take up too much of people's time. But basically, there was money allocated by the general forum after some refinancing, 3 million for the pool, 6 million for the parks. This was a few years ago. And then that money that was saved through the financing was set aside for the park should the original contingency run out. And however, with the caveat that of the 6 million, staff was only authorized to release or to spend 5.2 million. So this is the rest of that, or part of the rest of that. And it was just with that caveat from when that refinancing occurred that yes, it's for the project, but more, but it needs to be authorized to be released in the future. The future is now.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Okay, good.
Great.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah. Loan reserve, what had been designated as loan reserve is now basically being converted into contingency,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But just enough to cover the change orders they've already accrued?
No, there's more.
Okay.
Than the change orders. There are over 200, I believe it's just over $200,000 in change orders,
Okay.
right? That need to be paid based on work that's already done. And then they're, I think at this point, they recognize there are other things that can happen.
Yeah.
And if we appropriate this money, that provides the cushion that should exist in order to handle it. It hadn't been done before. Okay.
And then the other thing is that, I'll just add one more thing, which is that if the 578,000 is not released by the general forum, then because of water line work, it has to basically be released before the ground freezes. So I kept trying to ask a date. And it was the end of December, beginning of January, and that's because the project manager, who just resigned for the second time, said that, well, until the ground freezes, that's when they would have to basically pack up, leave site, and then come back at a future date after the funds were released. And that's only for that water line alone, the 39,000 sort of additional dollars, so to say.
Okay.
So hopefully, this project will move forward, and Wednesday, those funds will be released, and then contractors can be paid, and the water line can go in, and we don't want to end up with just a giant mud pit. So that's the status of the park right now.
All right. Thank you for the update.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other communication items from the board? All right, at this time, we have time for public comment. Each individual is limited up to 3 minutes for items related to board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. Is there anyone here to make a public comment? Sure. So if you could just come up and introduce yourself and your relationship to the
Tina
district.
Hennessy. I live in Park Forest. I have 2 kids in the district. So 2 quick things. One, I remain curious about the superintendent search, and will there be opportunity for the public to maybe see presentations from finalists? I'm curious about that. I'm also curious about whether or not students will be afforded a similar opportunity, and I think I'd like to go on record and say I think that would be beneficial to the district to have a really fully transparent process, and I encourage you to consider that. And then the second thing is I want to commend the administration and all of you for the proposal number 2 for the calendar. I know that it's not an action item tonight, but the idea that we would make space for Yom Kippur on our academic calendar, which we have not done previously, I think would be really meaningful to individuals in our district. So thank you for considering that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And it does include also Eid, which is the last day of Ramadan, so.
As a
Oh,
holiday.
okay. I didn't see that one. Somebody mentioned to me that, so I did look at the
Okay.
materials really quickly tonight while I was sitting here. So thank you for mentioning
Thank you.
that.
All right, any other public comment? Okay. Then with that, we will move on to routine approvals. Is there a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda? Oh, I'm sorry. Is there anyone online who wanted to make a public comment?
I did not see anyone.
No hands raised. Okay. So then we will take a motion to approve routine approvals.
So moved.
Okay, that's been
Second.
moved and seconded. Any discussions?
Yes.
Yes, Carleen?
On 5D,
Mm-hmm.
I was left out as one of the participants.
Okay, we can make that adjustment.
That's happened a couple times before.
I went in and added.
Okay, thank you.
Because Deb had emailed earlier today to, yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
So I think it's already on there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It is, it's on the one that's on the one.
Okay. Anything else in regard to routine approvals? Okay. Any public comment? Okay, then we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney? Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Okay, those items have passed. Colleen, I think what happened is the notes maybe just for some reason didn't capture everybody who was not a committee member who was here, but I'm not
But
sure.
then you can have people that was virtual because you were on it and you were virtual.
Yeah, and I couldn't
And I
really see
was
who was
here.
here because I was virtual, so I.
It was just an oversight.
It would- yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry,
It's
thank you.
corrected.
All right, so a motion to approve the purchase of Curriculum Associates LLC Elevation Software. This is shown in attachment 6A.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Okay, any public comment? All right, we will have a roll call vote.
Ms. Sidney? Yes. Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Item B is a motion to approve the purchase of Talking Points communication software. This is shown in attachment 6B.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item? Okay, any public comment? I'm sorry, Laurel?
I was just wondering, because we did talk about this at CCL, and it's such an interesting.
Put your mic on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Because we did talk about this at CCL, and it's such an interesting and innovative step forward that we're working on. I wondered if someone better qualified than I could give a very brief explanation of the difference this will make, we hope.
Yeah, Jonathan, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah. So Talking Points is a text messaging communication tool that uses artificial intelligence as well as live translators to help in communicating. We have found, and a lot of other schools have found across the state and the country, that text messaging is the main way that a lot of our families from marginalized populations and even some that are not are using. And I think about how many emails I get in a regular day, how quickly I can respond to a text versus emails. So we know that that is a powerful tool. And what we are trying to do is to better communicate with the many different families that we have in our school district, which include about 45 different home languages that are identified through our home language surveys. So Talking Points allows for either texting through an app, through a dashboard on the web, for a school personnel person to be able to text the family in English, and then based on the family's home language preference in Synergy, it will translate to them. It doesn't necessarily use the literal translation. The software learns different types of school-based words and conversation. And depending on if there's confusion about any sort of the conversation, translators can help to make sure that the actual message is given. So the language and the message goes to the family in their native language. They can respond back in their native language, and it comes back to the sender in English. So it's a very popular tool, and through all of the conversations I've been having around the state, it's very, very well respected. And we're hopeful that we'll use that as an entry point into this piece and continue looking at how that software and/or others can help tear down language barriers across their district.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any public comment on this item? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes?
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Okay, that item is passed. Item C is a motion to approve Policy 805, Emergency Preparedness and Response, and this is shown in Attachment 6C.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on this item? Okay, any public comment? All right, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney. Yes. Dr. Anderson.
Yes?
Okay, that item is passed. Item D is a motion to approve Mount Nittany Middle School's envelope remediation alternate as shown in Attachment 6D.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Okay, any public comment? All right, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney. Yes. Dr. Anderson.
Yes?
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item E is a motion to approve the purchase of baseball uniforms as shown in Attachment 6E.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any questions or discussion on this item? Deb?
I appreciate that we were given the uniform rotation schedule. That was attached to the memo after the agenda originally went out. So if you didn't see it, that's up there now. I do still think that we need to be transparent about how we're determining how many uniforms we're buying for each of the different sports. And I feel like that information used to be on the schedule when I saw a draft, and I don't see that now. So I just would like to say that I think that that would be worth reconsidering in the future, that to make sure that we're reevaluating the size of our rosters and that we're accommodating all of the students that are on the teams currently and not making an assumption on repurchasing based on previous roster sizes. It doesn't really affect tonight. It's just
yeah.
in general, saying that that would be helpful, I think, as we move through the process of the rotation schedule.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, any public comment on this item? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes?
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Okay, so that item has passed, and we're moving on to item A, the 2023-2024 proposed academic calendar. This is shown in Attachment 7A. And I will be calling on Ms. Yoder, and Ms. Merritt will be helping provide the proposals that we're looking at this evening. So,
Good evening, thank you.
and I know we have Chris is
Chris is online with us
Yep.
too. I told her I would go ahead and kick it off. She is going to answer if there is anything pertinent to her. So as the memo shared, we met with CCL at the November meeting and shared a proposal that the calendar committee met and agreed upon. And the key components of that would have been that the first student day would have aligned with Penn State on Monday, August 21st. The last day would have been May 30th. We had one day off for Grange Fair, which would have been on Friday, so it would have been a 4-day week consistent with past district practice. And that was from the faculty representation. At that meeting, CCL members discussed adding additional days. So calendar 1 that you have reflects what the calendar committee proposed. Then calendar 2, we took the recommendations that from members of the CCL, and we added, I want to get the date specific, 3 additional dates. We moved the start date to Tuesday so that the first week would be a 3-day week, with the first day starting August 22nd. The last day, because we added 2 other days, would be June 4th. There would be no school on the calendar too on Monday, September 25th for Yom Kippur, and then no school on Wednesday, April 10th for the observance of Eid. So they are the 2 that we are presenting to you tonight for informational.
I'm Dan.
I just want to thank the administration, Curtis, Danielle, Chris particularly, for those involved, and also the members of the calendar committee for engaging in a conversation with us about the calendar itself and some substantial adjustments. 2 or 3 days is a medium change, but I appreciate the thought and care that went into developing the second proposal, which really captured the discussion that really was coming from different members of the committee in that review. So thank you.
Amy?
I just, I appreciate, ditto all those things, of course. Just, I was confused then, why go from a 4-day week to a 3-day week when we were taking out more holidays? We were trying to find days other places, and then now we've gone to a shorter first week.
So-
Is it the timing of the market?
No, it was because 3 items of concern were brought forward at CCL. One was the Grange Fair and adding and removing that Monday again. So the second calendar reflects that. And then the 2 additional religious holiday observations. So we put all 3 days in on calendar 2, taking that feedback.
Okay, I was present. I didn't recall a request to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There was, yeah.
Yeah, I checked the minutes on that.
Okay, I must have had a little brain issue.
But it's a matter of, whole board discussion at this point, so.
Oh yeah, I just couldn't recall where that came from. So that's all.
Carlene?
Yeah, I just want to thank the people, the community that wrote in and told us how important the calendar was to them and those holidays to consider. And it was done in a very respectful manner. So I really appreciate the community's input.
Laurel?
Thanks. I think, though others may have, I was the one who brought up Grange Fair at the CCL meeting, and I still have that concern. And we've talked about that the reason for starting earlier is problems with childcare, but people deal with that all year long, including the vast majority of our population who are not Penn State professors, because even Penn State non-professors tend to work a traditional schedule. Professors sometimes have more leeway in their schedule. And
Maybe.
most professors have more leeway in their schedule. I don't know a single professor who teaches 8 hours a day for 5 days a week. But be that as it may, my concern is that starting so early and ending so early, I see no reason for it, either in terms of temperature, climate, or the issue of childcare, given that we don't end in December or in May when Penn State ends and goes out of session. So I just wanted to reiterate that. I do appreciate adding the 1 extra day, but I think it would be better if we just took the whole week. The other thing I wanted to mention, and see if there might be a way to work it in, even if we stick with the second option, which I in general do like, is that in March, if I'm reading correctly, we go from, the change would be from having a week that is a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday week to a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday week. I'm talking about right at the end of the month. And I assume the reason the teacher day moved is the change in the location of the end of semester. But even so, I think it's often easier for people not to try to manage a 3-day week in the middle of things. So I just wanted to mention that I tend to prefer it to either be Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, as opposed to the 3 days in the middle. So that was all.
Wait, so is that Easter weekend? Is that why
No,
that's-
no, it's long before Easter. Well, it is Easter weekend, but the 29th is off anyway.
Right.
And we have an in-service on the 28th.
So Thursday and Friday are back that
On
week.
the second one, but the first version had it on Monday.
Correct.
So that was what I meant by liking
Sorry.
that one better, that
Okay.
has the Thursday, Friday instead of Monday, Friday.
I suspect that's because the end of the marking period moved.
I figured that's why. But
Correct. The
I
end of
still
the
want-
marking period, we had to balance all 4 marking periods by adding the days in, and we had a very significant imbalance. So that's why we had to do that.
Thank you, Chris. That's important too.
Yep.
Deb?
I was just curious, since the 3-day start week was an experiment this year, if there was any feedback from the administration or from students or teachers, like, was that okay? Did people like it? Did people hate it? I was just curious if we had any feedback about that 3-day start week instead of the 4-day start week. It's okay to say no.
And
but
Chris, you
if we
could
did.
certainly talk too. I think we heard positives and concerns. One was daycare for people going back in the full week by not coming on Monday, but we did hear other things that it was a nice way to ease into it. The biggest, I think the calendar committee, when they came together, and Chris can certainly talk to this, she really led that committee. I was there, was trying to get days in prior to Memorial Day, just because of the value. Kids come back eager to learn, and you begin to hit at the end of May, and we lose people who, once Penn State has lost, then they become unenrolled and we lose people. So the attendance drops actually, whereas there was a higher attendance on this date than days after May, at the end of May last year.
Thanks.
So that really is a point in favor of like trying to get as many days in that week as possible, not to eliminate that week altogether.
So,
And I think we've had extensive discussions about the value of school days earlier in the school year as opposed to later in the school year. Yeah, and I really don't want to talk about my wants. There's lots of things that I would want or enjoy or like to see. But to the point that you made about the value of those early days and the concerns, we have the ability to look at short weeks based on data and attendance when we've discussed spring break and when we had partial spring breaks and things like that. And knowing particularly at elementary, we do a lot of quick, early, short hitter, so to speak, assessments of young students early when they're in school. I certainly, I'm not asking anyone to go back and recreate the calendar, but I think I would be quite comfortable to still have a 4-day week should the administration at some point say that that was more valuable. The most important thing for me was to address the religious holiday issues. And we have that Friday for Grange Fair, which has been communicated as to be the most essential one to help the most students. So that's my feedback.
I had a question about kindergarten, because this does just give kindergarten a 2-day week. If we continue having the 3-day week, then they only have a 2-day week, which is kind of that's a really short start for kindergarten. And I think that's one of the things that gives me pause about that 3-day week there, is knowing that it's really a 2-day week for our kids who are first, not having time to build some momentum.
Yeah, because they have an
It's youngest
orientation that
kids.
first day and not a full day.
Yeah.
That could be tough.
Yes, they need.
No opportunity to really get settled in to
Yeah.
achieve anything during that time.
That's tough.
Yeah. Any other comments? Yeah, I definitely appreciate putting together a calendar that includes those religious holidays. I think
Yes.
we have been hearing from families in the Jewish community for years now about just the challenges with when their children are missing school consistently on those days, and that those are never days off for them, and which is inequitable, in comparison to the rest of the community that has religious holidays off. So.
Sorry, Amber, can I just,
Yep.
on that topic, I guess, in addition to having the days off, assuming if we go with that calendar, I would just like to encourage our district to keep encouraging our classroom teachers and others to make sure that they're accommodating when students need to take off for other religious holidays that may or may not be included in the calendar. Like, we need to be able to
Yes.
do better on that, regardless of what the calendar looks like. So I want to just make
Yes,
sure we do that.
ditto.
And last year, we did put the high holidays on the back. We don't have those currently. We will get those on, and we also mark those, especially for back-to-school nights. I know we ended up missing some throughout the year with evening meetings, but we are certainly trying to be vigilant, and we will make sure again that they are added, taking a look at those so that they are marked.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we
Okay.
get direction as far as which calendar you would like to bring forward for action item for next board meeting?
I prefer to.
I'm good with 2.
2 works.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further questions or discussion? Okay. All right, so moving on to item B is the 23-24 proposed preliminary budget shown in attachment 7B. And we'll have Randy Brown at the table, and Donna Watson is online to provide an update on budget development. So thank you.
Set up here with my computer. I apologize. But yeah, Donna is online and obviously does a vast amount of this work and could not do it without her. So just want to go through the presentation with you tonight. Here we go. All right, so we are in the midst of the 23-24 proposed preliminary budget discussion. The board decision points right now are a proposed preliminary budget or an accelerated budget opt-out resolution. Your deadline for that resolution is January 26th, so it would be scheduled then on your January 23rd board meeting. What is an accelerated budget opt-out resolution maintains any real estate tax rate increase would be within the Act 1 index for fiscal year 23-24, that is 4.1%. This will comply with we will still comply with the budget adoption rules in the school code, and then the district would not be eligible to use Act 1 referendum exceptions. What is the Act 1 index? It's calculated by averaging the percent increase in the Pennsylvania statewide average weekly wage and the federal employment cost index for elementary and secondary schools. What is a referendum exception? It allows for the tax rate to be set higher than the index for certain purposes. These include school construction, debt service, special education expenditures, and retirement contributions. Act 1 of 2006, since this time period, the referendum exceptions in the district have been used for the state high referendum debt in 2015-16 and in 2016-17, and retirement contributions in 2010-11 through 2013-14. The rate has been within the index all other years. The resolution has been used frequently, still follows the preliminary budget process, which allows for board discussion of budget development and public input. Why approve the resolution? It provides notice to the community of the intent to maintain the tax rate within the index, will not apply for exceptions, does not set the tax rate. The tax rate is approved with the final budget. It allows the board to consider administrative recommendations during the budget development process. And just as a reminder, the state budget approval deadline is June 30. You're welcome, Laurel.
Thank you.
The proposed preliminary budget, we have presented 3 options for discussion and presentation. They are 0%, 2%, and 4.1%, which is the Act 1 index. The 2% is typically right around our average tax increase, and that's where we came in to play there. Each of these different rate increases would impact the level of use of committed fund balance and projected negative shortfalls in the multi-year projections. The prior 3-year tax increases have been 0, 0, and 3.4 most recently. At the December 14th Finance Committee, we asked that you will discuss the rate increase that you would like to see in future budget presentations. We'd like to move it down to 1 if possible. Obviously, if at anytime there is a rationale for multiple rates for presentation purposes, we obviously can accommodate that as well.
You mean move it down to one preferred option?
One preferred option, that's what we'd like to do, yes. Thank you. You said that more succinctly than I.
Just for a second, I was like, do you mean 1% or 1%?
No, one option, yes, I'm sorry. The real estate tax this graph shows the real estate tax increases versus the Act 1 index over time since the Act 1 index was created in 2006-07. The tax increase options, we have here a slide showing our beginning fund proposed beginning fund balance, and then the proposed revenue, expenses, and then committed fund balances, as well as ending unassigned fund balance under the three scenarios. Other local revenue major assumptions. We have real estate tax assessed value growth at 1.2%, collection percentage at 92.7.2%, and earned income growth at 2.5%. Our historical assessed value growth is mapped out here for you compared to what we had budgeted, and over the last 5 years, the average is 1.5%, and 10 years is 1.36%. Earned income tax historical percentage change is graphed here for you. The 5-year is 3.69, 10-year average is 4.01, and the 5-year through 2019-2020 was 3.02. And that's just because we had so much change during the pandemic, we thought we'd throw that 5-year in there as well. The expense assumptions under salaries and benefits, we're reflecting the impacts of current contractual agreements and estimates for those expiring. Assumes 2022 and 2020 through 2023 budgeted contracted staffing levels, with the exception of PTS science position. Due to grant funding availability ending, summer school and tutoring have been modified to return to a level closer to historical experience. We are working on a proposal with our curriculum department to understand, in our instructional areas, to understand what is the more appropriate level for this coming summer and beyond. We do have some federal funding available for this coming summer, but it is at a greatly reduced level compared to what we've had for the last 2 summers. We also assume a 10% rate increase for health insurance over the 2022-2023 projected expenses. Expense assumptions in continuing, we have higher inflationary increases for goods and services than normal. Assumes reduction in psychological services due to elimination of grant funding. We are continuing to explore external grants, including continuation of funding with the SCASD Education Foundation. This assumes all debt services funded from the general fund and assumes no transfer to capital reserve fund, given the budget revenue is not in excess of expenses. Fund balance assumptions. Obviously, the unrestricted fund balance would maintain at just under 8% of the state, or which is equal to the state minimum. The committed fund balance, the health insurance, we were very fortunate to fund that at 6 months of estimated health insurance expense in 21-22, and will continue to maintain that funding level in the future years. PSERS, we are recommending reallocating this in 23-24. And then the revenue shortfall would be utilized to fund expenses in excess of revenues in our projection years. Items of focus in the coming budget development process are compensation and benefits, and athletics and student activities. That does include intramurals and our SEAL program. Additional items for consideration is reading curriculum that is being reviewed, grant-funded expenses, basically expenses that are grant-funded in 22-23, like I said, about summer school and psychological services, and then inflationary impacts. And we are really feeling that impact this year. We have spent I believe so far this year, more contingency than I can remember spending in a great number of years because of inflation. The multi-year projections, we see a declining fund balance as expenses exceed revenues, and that could have an impact on future capital projects, but we're obviously trying to manage that, and we will have in the coming months or weeks an analysis of that capital for you as well, and a timeline on some of our projected upcoming projects. This graph is a graph that we've come to, at least I have come to dislike.
I think all this stuff.
I mean,
Well,
Yeah.
my dislike has grown. And it is, just to reiterate, it is showing our total general fund balance, or our total fund balance for the general fund, consisting of committed and unassigned fund balance, and how it is projected to decline. Next steps, there'll be a finance and audit meeting next Wednesday. Then we'll have board discussions, the next 3 board meetings. And unless the board provides other direction on the January 23rd agenda, we'll have a consideration of an opt-out resolution.
As an action item. at that
As an
time.
action item, yes, sorry. Okay, so I wanted to highlight some of the items in the attachments for you tonight. And Donna, feel free to jump in and correct me or add any additional information as I try to go over this information. In attachment E are the comparative statements for our 22-23 projection year. And this is obviously our current fiscal year.
Can you give us a page number?
20,
Thank you.
the wonder of page numbers.
So helpful.
Sure. And so just to compare our budget to our current projection, our local revenue is about $3 million, $3.1 million higher, projected to be higher than budget. And the largest portion of that is attributed to our earned income tax. Obviously, our budget was built long before we knew how our earned income tax revenue was going to finish in the last fiscal year. And so we've now carried that projection, increased that projection to be more reflective of that. And that is by about 1.4 million. Another area where we are seeing significant change is in our interest rates. And again, when we built the budget for this year, we had no expectation that interest rates would rise to the level that they are. So we've increased that by about $900,000. On the state revenue side, we received about $1.5 million more in basic ed subsidy in the current year than we had budgeted. And so we've increased that projection as well. And then there's about $400,000 of total federal revenue more projected than what we had included in our budget. So that's leaving us with about $5.4 million in revenue greater than what we had budgeted. On the salary side, on the expenses side, excuse me, honestly, to look at the depth and breadth of the expenses, we have not had a chance to go into a lot of great detail. But there are some items that we want to share with you for our updated projections. Health insurance, because we know that last year ended so much better, which we are very grateful for, and we have decreased our projection on those expenses by about $2.3 million. And that is based upon our first year of self-insurance. We are on a fairly regular basis keeping touch with our actuaries, Conrad Siegel, and they'll actually be present at the finance meeting next week to discuss our expectations and different things with you as well. The only other item that is significantly different is debt service, and that reason is because we've moved the debt service that we had originally projected to pay for from the capital reserve fund into the general fund because of reasons that we've talked about previously. So this increases this does increase our expenses, so our expenses do expect to be lower in total by about 3 million whenever you factor in all of the changes with our transfers and use of fund balance for the revenue shortfall or COVID fund balance, the fund balance commitment for health insurance, and then also the use of the PSERS fund balance. And again, to date, we've used about 470,000 of our contingency to cover inflationary costs and budget contractor costs that we have had to incur. So we still are looking at an unassigned fund balance of 7.9%, or about $14 million. Then, I'm sorry, okay. So our projected ending fund balances, and I'm going to take you to, and then I'll allow you time to catch up. Slide 41, please. And in this scenario of our multi-year projection, this is assuming a 4.1% tax increase, which is the maximum allowable. Because you have not given any direction, I'm just choosing this one for explanatory purposes, and I think you understand in a few minutes why. So here we have all of our various fund balance categories. We have the general fund unassigned, and I'm looking at column AE, or the projected for 22-23. And we're at 14.5 million, which is 7.92%. Then, as I said, we're proposing that we roll in the, or we end the commitment of the PSERS fund balance, but that, and what that would do is that would then allow for, cover the additional expenses greater than revenues this year. We would maintain the revenue shortfall fund balance, which is 24.4 million. And then we would increase the health insurance fund balance by about 800,000 to just under $8 million. This would leave us with an ending fund balance in total in the general fund of just shy of $47 million, which is about 700,000 or so less than where we were at the 21-22 year, which is at the very bottom of column AC. So there are different scenarios or different schedules for the multi-year projections. One, as I said, one with a 0% increase, one with a 2%, and then one with 4.1. Obviously, 4.1 is going to generate more revenue. And that carries through over time. And so if you want to flip through all of the different ending fund balance pages, like I'm showing you here, this scenario projects that fund balance could be around $31 million in the year 2031, 2032. It would be lower than that under the 2% scenario, and obviously lower than that even more under the no increase. So I just wanted to share all of this information, put this into perspective. And again, we're not asking for any commitment tonight. We want to have a further detailed discussion in Finance Committee. But for those of you who aren't at Finance Committee or who just have questions tonight, we'll be happy to take those. But we really would like to come down to one scenario that would be probably your most desired, or probably your maximum that you would want to see as a tax increase, but not necessarily holding anyone accountable to that at this point in time for our further projection. Donna, did I miss anything, or can you think of anything that I could have said in a more clear way?
No, I think that's it. Randy, thank you.
Thank you, Donna. So board members, do you have any questions or comments at this time?
We can talk about this more in finance, but, which actually reminds me, we are changing the committee structure, but we do need this December Finance Committee meeting.
do.
So those of us who have been on finance for the previous year, please come on December 14th. So it's not just Dan and I, but Dan, please come, even though you weren't on it last year. And anyone is always welcome but I would like it
many
to
of
be
us
more.
as possible
I
might
would
be
like it
helpful
to
at
be
this
more than me, most
This is true.
importantly. So anyway, everyone is welcome,
I'll be
please,
there.
as many people as possible, but at least a couple more. I just wanted to ask real briefly about, in the discussion of, as we're building the budget for the following academic year, or the following fiscal year, looking at the reduction of psychological services as the grant funds go away. Like, you already talked a little bit about the fact that you're going to be talking with curriculum about where we think the summer school should be versus what can we fund with the funds that are available. Obviously, I'm sure you're already having these conversations. We need to be thinking about where our mental health supports should be.
Yep.
Right? So even if the grant funding goes away, if that's a true need that is continuing in our community, then I think we're going to need to find a way to fund it. And so I just want to, I know you
From a
think that
financial
too.
perspective, I'm only letting you know
Right.
that the budget has been based on what the district has available.
Right.
And yes, there'll be, that's why we need, and I know that you know this, but
Yeah.
there'll be different budget discussions to talk about additions or revisions, meaning, an addition obviously would be more money that was in the previous projection.
Right.
Or a revision could include, well, we're not going to do this, but because we're going to fund this.
Okay.
So, yep, no, absolutely.
I know you're aware of it. I just don't want the public to think we're just going to cut it out because grant funding goes away. It's obviously going to be a conversation about needs.
Absolutely.
So, thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Randy.
One of the things, I'm coming back, I was a member of the Finance Committee years ago, Randy, for 2 or 3 years, and so I have some catching up to do. I mean, I've given it some attention, but not nearly the attention that Deb has committed and other members of the committee. But one of the things that, one of the principles I have acquired over the years has been looking at the impact of the annual budget in terms of the ways it can constrain us financially through no fault of our own. The 2 years in which we had a 0% increase, for example, really holds back our capacity going into the future because of the compounding effects of those losses.
Right.
So when we're thinking about, and we're also looking at an inflationary period. So if we're looking at as high as 4.1, I think we need to take into account, one, inflation, the pressures of inflation, plus recognizing that we flattened things out for 2 years due to the impact of the recession, if you will, on our local economy, particularly small business owners. We held back on that, but now we may be in a circumstance where we're required, in a sense, to approach, if not the index, but come closer to that level under the circumstances that we're in, given the sacrifices we've made previously, and also the impact of inflation. Just thinking out loud about this. And I'm just one of 9, obviously. It's just an idea that occurs to me.
And
talking about
understanding
this.
our students' needs in the wake of
That too.
the pandemic are greater than ever.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next item, item C, is the capital project update, shown in 7C. So I think we'll have Mr. Fisher at the table as well, to provide an overview of summer projects.
So we just wanted to provide kind of a preliminary update on the projects, kind of our first pass, what we're looking at for our summer 23 projects. And like I said, these, we're looking at probably permission to bid on a project list in early January. But we want to get them in front of you, and we have some preliminary cost estimates that will be further vetted, the pencil sharpened before we bring it to permission to bid. So I'm just going to go down through them kind of high level, and then if there's any questions, feel free to ask. So bus garage, we have a lot of manual 55-gallon drum handling going on, which presents a pretty large safety concern, in my opinion. So we're looking at both some containment and an oil delivery system for our waste oil. Equipment shed's kind of self-explanatory. Generator, so Easterly Parkway and Grays Woods are the only schools we don't have emergency generator backup. You may ask why we prioritized Easterly over Grays Woods. Is because in my experience, they lose power more. So, Ferguson Township, we have some ponding that happens down, both from some gutter issues and also on the parking lot as well. So we're looking to try to address that. The handrail, so on the left-hand side of the building, if you're ever out there, you can see it's showing some severe degradation. It needs concrete work and metal work as well. And then the front entrance as well, something we want to do over the summer. You can see there's a little bit of degradation there as far as in the woodwork on that. Grays Woods, this fire suppression system is something we tried to get done last year. We didn't get the competitive bidding that we would have liked, so we're trying to get these out a little bit earlier this time. And this is the dry system for the fire suppression. Right? We're constantly repairing the thing, so it has some issues, and it's reached its end of life. Also at Grays Woods, it's just some older pumping systems there, so we'll be able to put in some more efficient pumping systems that they've reached their useful life. Memorial Field, both turf and lighting upgrades, so new LED lights, and then turf. So we're interviewing different vendors now. Take a look at that. I do realize right now that my cost estimates for those two are actually swapped, so that's my mistake.
How often does the turf at Memorial Field get replaced? What's the lifespan?
10 years, about typical, yep.
And it's very sad for me that it's been 10 years since we did that. I can't believe how quickly
flown by.
The other thing that I will point out, and I know that some of this may have been mentioned at a previous committee or meeting, but just to make it clear, that is going to be funded by donor, a previous donor as well. So that's not something in our, it shows up like it's coming out of our capital budget, but we have revenue for that. So just wanted to share that.
I should mention on the lighting upgrade, we are looking at potentially bringing that to you this month as a project to avoid some cost increases into 2023 at the first of the year. So,
will the lighting upgrade be equivalent to like the Northfield, where it can be done with a cell phone instead of manual labor?
it will, yes. So it'll be all LED. It'll be much nicer lighting and more, what I want to say, less dark spots on the field and more consistent throughout. Is what we're seeing with the later technology.
And it has less spillage too.
Less spillage and some good energy savings as well.
Awesome.
Mountain Knee Middle, fire alarm system upgrades. This is one that was also tabled from last year. This is the alarm system, so it's all the detectors, pull stations, the controllers, that kind of thing. We just couldn't get the parts and pieces last year from supply chain issues. This is also one that we may bring here at next board meeting, just because of the lead time on some of the items. The North, the heating and domestic hot water system upgrades, that's already been approved. We've talked about that. The CTC renovations for IT, Virtual Academy and the Right program. We've discussed that. Tennis court resurfacing. So the tennis courts up at Community Field are in pretty rough shape. I spent some time with the tennis coach up there, and I'm not a tennis court expert, but she pointed out all the deficiencies, and I would have to agree. So we set aside some funds for that. Also at North, the fencing around the North Field, we've earmarked some funds. So right now we find there's a safety concern with our soccer goals kind of put off to the side, in which they're very close to the playing surface. So it presents a safety concern for the kids. So we're taking a look at actually just moving that fence back about 12 feet. Maintaining the same fence, basically just moving the whole thing back. Park Forest Elementary, building automation system upgrades. So Park Forest Elementary is unique in its automation system, and it's not consistent with the rest of the district. We don't have near the capabilities or transparency of the equipment as other schools. So we're looking at performing an upgrade there. Park Forest Middle, we've earmarked some money for HVAC upgrades. That scope is yet to be determined, along with some sidewalk repair, which we do have a study from last year, kind of the worst areas. We have some trip hazards that we want to kind of take care of. So,
At Park Forest with the HVAC upgrades, I will be like a broken record about ventilation and air quality, but I think that school has been one of our lesser.
Forever.
Yeah, that the air quality there
back to
to
the
make sure
80s.
that it's a concern, I think. Like during the pandemic, it seemed like we were going into it that there were some, that school was not at the same level as the rest of our facilities, so.
It would be the oldest building.
Well, of course.
And
So that makes sense.
Right,
Yeah.
and I actually, I do the continuous commissioning, and I was actually looking at Park Forest Middle here at the beginning of this meeting, and everything is operating as it should. Our outside air dampers are operating, bringing in enough fresh air.
Okay,
So I don't see any issues.
okay, okay.
So.
More episodic stuff. That's been episodic, not an awful. Can I just make a suggestion, Mike? Just, we're so familiar referring to it as CTC renovation. Oh, sorry. We're so used to looking at it as CTC renovations because we know what we're talking about, but for the community who might not be following everything that we're doing, we might want to refer to that project differently as like renovations of old CTC, or you know what I mean? Just
Former CTC. or
yeah,
something.
just because
Sure.
it just says CTC renovations, and everybody knows we have a brand new CTC center. I think they would be shocked at a $3.2 million project there, but I think we just should be a little more clear for somebody who might just be browsing.
Sure, no problem.
Great.
Good suggestion.
Yeah, minor issue, but thanks.
Any other questions?
I'm wondering, and Amy and I have talked about this, and this has come up before, but there have been some concerns about access, and we did the curb cuts, which was a big leap forward, but there have been other concerns in relation to the access to the elevator within the new high school, and in terms of also in terms of the doors being. Well, let me back up a bit. We also have concerns about security, and we want to be certain when school is in session that people just can't walk in off the street. But there are instances outside of school hours where students or adults with physical disabilities should be able to open the door to be able to get into the school. And that's been a problem since the day the school was first opened. And I don't think relative to these costs, I don't think it would approach maybe a third of these in terms of the cost for those particular corrections. So I'm just advocating that we take into account those access needs that have been around for a long, long time. And I know it's something we've talked about before, but I just wanted to be sure, I wanted to bring it up again.
Also getting out, like in case of fire, for people who are in any kind of device with wheels. I remember hearing about this at the student work session at the high school, and the elevator issue. And so, I appreciate that you brought it up, Dan, when we're looking at these costs and budgeting, because if we go back to the group that Amy is a part of, the Disability Working Group, and maybe go to them and see what are the highest priorities so that that can be included in the list.
So I can tell you that the two priorities that were brought to my attention, one was the elevator keys, which we are currently working on. We have a solution for that. And another one was some auditorium doors that were actually specifically tough to open. So we're looking at putting automatic openers on that. So we haven't found our most cost-effective solution yet. So it's not on here, but we do have contingency built in, and it's. Yeah.
Yeah, so this was coming in access from the outside.
Sure.
Yeah,
No, I know,
so when
yep.
people are coming to the school after hours, during the school day, the Standing Stone folks are there to open the doors for
right,
you.
but
But after hours, they're not
After
there.
hours,
So if
and-
you're in a wheelchair coming up to the school after hours, it could be very
I know
difficult.
of one
to get
student
in.
in particular who otherwise was incredibly capable, but due to the nature of his disability, he had mobility needs. And he needed to be able to get into the school. He needed to be able to have a latch or something that he could a button basically to
Press
push, the little one with the disability logo on it that would get him into the school. And I would imagine on either side, on either end of the high school would be needed, because the distance between the two was so great.
Yeah, he described how it was trying to maneuver his way through the building, and he actually graduated, but
Yeah.
he wanted to share with us so that students in similar situations in the future wouldn't have to go through what he went through.
Right.
And so that's why we keep talking about it.
Yeah, I know there's been several discussions internally about it with the SROs specifically. So we'll keep
Thanks,
it on
Mike.
the radar.
Thank you. Maybe we can just find a way to include it in the collection of needs.
Yeah, I remember prior to the pandemic, we had started on like an accessibility plan, right?
Right.
That we were going to
Right.
need, it was going to take some years to phase in
Right.
improvements with curb cuts throughout all of our campuses. And I don't know if that's something we want to potentially pick up again,
Yeah.
because we want to make sure all of our campuses have the
Right.
curb cuts where they need to be.
Access, absolutely.
I think it did kind of get stalled due to the pandemic, and then also with Ed leaving and Mike coming, I'm not sure, but I know we had
Right.
a phased list of things that needed to be addressed, so I think that'd be a great thing to turn back to now that we are able.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you have that list from our working group, I'd love to take a look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no
So that
list
might
from
be-
the working group. You have, and you know about, you have addressed a lot of the concerns from that. The push-button door issue has been a much more complicated one, I know, because there's a lot of nuance about the time of day it's available and a variety of issues. And so I know we've brought that up several times, and we've heard that there's some investigation happening about maybe what other schools have would be a good starting place, whether any of them have found a solution to that problem. There was some talk about walkthroughs and whether there should be an ongoing touch point and back and forth between you and potentially some committee some grouping of individuals from special ed, that as they have different students with different unique needs that are different than that they've experienced in the past, they can potentially have a means to address. Of course, I know they can come to you, but sometimes when we set up some of these little back and forths, we're more likely to see those things happen. I think that, Mike, you had said when you first came on that you would be having your eye out, that when you did sidewalk remediations at different buildings, you would be looking for opportunities to institute curb cuts at different campuses as you rolled through these things. So I remember specifically you saying and making that commitment to us, which I really appreciated. So I know that that has been on your radar before. So in terms of a detailed list from the work group, there's not. They had gone through and walked with, I don't remember if it was Mike when he very first came on or whether it was with Ed Poprick, but they had walked through the high school about some particular issues, mainly related to certain students they had in the building, and then one or two conceptual things like the keys for the elevators. So I think despite the changeover in physical plan, I think much of it has been communicated to you. Just some of those bigger issues like doors is kind of a bigger challenge to overcome.
Thank you for remembering all of that, Amy.
Sure.
And Mike, I know, has reported to me that he and the special ed department have met with different students and teachers, even as recent as this year already.
I bet.
So they are having those ongoing conversations.
Right. All right. Okay. Any other questions on this? We'll move on to the physical plant building and north renovations update in attachment 7D.
Sure, so just a progress report, starting with the physical plant building first. We had a few at the last public meeting. We had a few questions, concerns One which was the orientation of the building, so that it faced a little bit further south to get a little bit better solar performance if we chose to put solar on it. Another one was parking was a concern. And then lastly, I think it was asked why we weren't, going to be a net zero building. So I've addressed these. The orientation really is, the reason we chose that is because we're dealing with a large embankment right there. So the orientation of the building, and talking with our civil engineers about that orientation, we felt as though it's going to be a much larger task in excavation and siting. To try to turn that building kind of away from the embankment, because right now it kind of sits there where the second floor would just come right out on a community field, nice and neat. So that's one of the reasoning behind it.
Not on community field, but onto the same level as
yes,
community
onto the same level. Yes.
I'm having a palpitations. We're going to have interested parties understanding.
Yeah, so in parking, I actually took a look at, we had an overhead from back in 2015, before the high school was kind of started there, and it's actually quite amazing the size of the lot up top versus back at that stage in that year. So it's actually probably 4 times the size up top the community field as it is now without that lower gravel lot, because the concern was if we take up that lower gravel lot, people would do park down there, even though it's not technically a parking area. So, but we are, it's on our minds, and we're looking at it, and once we kind of develop the plans further, we'll be able to get up, measure, and kind of see how many more spots we'll create up top with the paving. And then as far as the wire we're putting solar on now, or a net zero, I said we didn't include that at this time, but we are prepared to put it on if the board so desires at some time. Like I said, we are completely minimizing what we have on the roof, so no large rooftop units, no sunlights up there. We'll keep exhaust fans to a minimum or other venting apparatus. And then make sure, obviously, the structure was there so that if we want to put solar on at any time, we'll be able to. So those are the kind of the 3 things. For those of you that were here, did I miss anything? Go ahead, Peter.
No.
Okay.
You didn't miss anything. But I have a comment about solar installation now, later, and it's just kind of I think it's a kind of decision chain thought. So looking at the building now, understanding perfectly well the logic of we don't want to blow hundreds, thousands of dollars more doing excavation, right, increased site treatment, et cetera, that would come from facing the building due south. Looking at the orientation of the building and where there could be anticipated trees, doing a diagonal lay of solar on the roof seems like it would be the best option, just because of the way that, and I think I'm understanding that right.
Yes.
Okay. So it is also my understanding that a number of staff will leave the Fairmount building in order to come over here. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So our energy, presumably, our energy costs in the Fairmount building, at least with electricity, should go down.
Correct.
Okay. But we're adding electricity over here. Is there any sense of what that differential is?
I would say that our savings are going to be in natural gas more so than electricity.
Okay.
Going from Fairmount to the new building.
Okay. So when we had talked about the sort of the range of purchased electricity that we would put into the solar power working group, right? And we ended up with putting in 60 to 85%. Part of the logic for that higher bound in the upper level of that number was to aggressively pursue more electricity savings in the district. But now we're going to be adding more electricity. And so I think that the board, I think that we're not going to solve this problem now. I just want to kind of put that on the table because it's going to impact our future electricity procurement, what that might mean for our PPA, what that power purchase agreement for those in the public, right? Because that's another moving part that we're bringing in while these two processes are happening in tandem. And I don't want them to get lost in one another or to one another. And I just want us to be mindful and make sure that we make the best plan that we can. That's part of, I think that in my position, me as one board member obviously wants to pursue the most aggressive electricity savings that we can and the maximum centralized renewable energy production that we can, especially if it's cost effective. And that the next sort of layer of that can be covered, I would hope, by a zero carbon power purchase agreement, and then we have the rest of an electricity contract. I just want all of us to be as mindful of that as we can be.
So I'm thinking through your original question in my head here, and I think the impact on electricity will be negligible. We're going to have much more, so a fair amount right now, a lot of it's basically mothballed, right? So it's not like the entire building is being heated and cooled, right? There's no cooling in the building, right? There's window air conditioners here and there,
Definitely
right? So, and it's, an old steam boiler system that's really inefficient. So our savings are really going to come from natural gas, number one. And two, we'll have, we've got an energy model already for the new building, and the numbers that are coming back for our HVAC loads are really minor.
Okay.
So I would be surprised if we have any increase in electric use.
Okay. Yeah, I think that I don't want to assert anything about I'm not alarmed about anything. I just want us to all be mindful of what that means. And I appreciate that a lot because we have all the discussions have been about a highly energy electricity efficient building, period.
So if I can ask a question, has the team, Mike, looked at how long of a payback period we would be incurring if we installed solar panels to heat or to provide electricity for that building? And I guess the reason I'm saying that is because if we're not going up to 100% of our previous usage, which we, recorded usage, then, as Peter and I agreed upon, the best, I know it's amazing.
It's amazing.
As we agreed upon, the best electricity is the one that we don't purchase.
Correct.
Is the quantity that we don't purchase. And so I guess that's a question because we haven't focused on that yet in our projects, but we did in our high school and our elementary schools as far as what is our payback period for some of these lead opportunities. So I guess I would, unless board members say don't waste the administration's time, that would be something that would be interesting to me.
We have not.
Could you please?
Yes.
Thank you.
May
knew that was
I
coming.
say one more thing? So in the structure of the Inflation Reduction Act, and I'm not sure where you all may be in this, municipal governments, local governments are able to get a rebate that is the equivalent of the 30% tax incentive. Municipal governments obviously couldn't get that before because we are a non-taxable entity. But I'm not sure at this point if schools are able to get that. I think that they are. as a local government, as an instrumentality of the state. And so I would really encourage us to look at that, because if that's the case, that cost, right, goes down considerably, and it isn't as applicable to other parts of the project.
Sure.
So, yeah, and I spoke with someone who works at a firm when I was at the Pennsylvania School Board Association conference, who had talked about that. So,
Okay.
it's just another.
All right, yeah, we can certainly take a look at that. We did look into kind of the next part of the memo there is as far as our HVAC design selection. So we've kicked around geothermal a little bit, and we can get, I think it's through the state funding about a 30%, and what we would anticipate about a 10% through the IRA. It's not kind of in stone yet, but it would only apply to geothermal systems. And this variable refrigerant flow system is within 2% efficiency of the geothermal, with a greatly reduced cost and maintenance over time. So that's kind of the way, even with the grant funding and not including the hours to seek it, the VRF systems are actually a better deal.
Yeah.
I want to add just one thing to Peter's comments, which just to point out and highlight that we had actually, at the beginning of the first conversations about an SPPA, we had said, let's be mindful, I think that's even the word we used, of any changes in our electricity usage that might occur during the process. And this is exactly, I think, why you asked the question. But it's it's an important question to ask, and for Mike to give us an answer, because that could affect our, what we want to put in the contract. So anyway, thank you for highlighting that. And it's nice that we've already talked about it at least once here at this meeting, because that needed to be asked.
Any other questions or comments on the physical plant building?
Laurel?
It's been hard to know when to even bring this up, because since we started talking about the building and we all know that there's a need that I think everyone agrees to, it's been hard to know when to say, hey, can we step back and sort of look down over the whole project again? So when I was thinking about that after the last public meeting, which was moderately well attended for some of our public meetings, and I appreciate all the detail that's gone in and that you did in answering people and the presentations you've given. But as I thought about it, it seemed to me that both as a board member and as a community member, the two big pieces that I still was trying to wrap my head around were, it's easier for me to use my notes. Why move at all? And I think probably the members of the board and the administration have a better sense of that, because we've walked through Fairmont more recently, but a lot of people haven't. And just as with the high school renovation, part of what we did was we took some pictures and we showed people, hey, this is what we're trying to make do with, and it's not working. So I think getting a better sense of why what we have been using isn't working and is not good enough. And in addition, especially in this case, why, even if we could, somehow renovate it, it might still not be the right thing to do, and why that might be. So why move at all, I think, is the first big question. And the second one is where to move. And we've been talking about the high school campus, which may well be the best one for all kinds of reasons. But the truth is, I don't actually know what those reasons are, other than it's been there. So it may be that you looked at lots and lots of different things, and this is the best place, it's the most central, whatever. But I think if we can answer that question, that would certainly help explain to the public, as well as to board members, but why we're moving forward with this, because I at least have been hearing from a lot of people about Park Forest Middle and the real desire to move on that one. So again, I wasn't sure when to drop that in, but I did want to make you aware of the concerns I had.
Sure. Would you like to have a discussion now about it, or would you like a memo at the next board meeting?
May I speak? So this, just for members of the public and members of the board, this item has appeared in the July, August, September, October, and agendas moving up till now. The justification for why it would move and where it would move has been present on 6 months of agendas. And I think that, I mean, Mr. Fisher, you're free to answer this question. I just think that I guess I would call it the implication of the question is that, or questions, is that this has not been a forthcoming process, and I would just simply completely disagree with that because it has been pretty clear, and both you and Mr. Brown addressed it directly to Mr. Zwart, who was sitting in the back of the audience at the last public input session, which was an additional layer of transparency on an already very transparent process. That's all I'll say about that.
And I would add, as when Ms. Zidney addressed this question to board leadership and the interim superintendent, I replied trying to at least remind her of those explanations as to what the justifications had been in terms of the need to have people vacate Fairmount. Leaving one remaining operation at Fairmount meant that no decisions could be made about that building until that occurred, and various other responses to this question. So I would concur with you, Peter, that these issues have been raised, and we've had votes on proceeding with this project, which means that we're in the process of moving forward. So I, as one board member, certainly have no need to rehash that, nor do I see a reason to move backward to readdress those issues.
Randy?
One deficiency that we may be guilty of is not building a historical record outside of board agendas. We had a project website for all of our previous high schools.
That's true.
Or our high school and our other building projects.
Okay.
I don't think that it would be extremely laborsome for the staff to build a website for these projects, to document this information.
Put all the documents in one spot.
Yes.
That's probably a good idea.
And maybe even add some Fairmont pictures, as an example. Would that suffice? Would that allow the community to have another opportunity to review and an opportunity for board members to refer to?
I think it would be really good to have what we have in one place for everyone, and even moving forward as pictures are taken. And I can follow up further with you, but I guess, though I've listened also, and maybe I just missed it, it's quite possible I missed it. And if so, I'm really sorry about that. I just still, I recall asking at one point very early on, it may have been even in July, about the calculations for storage needed. For instance, what we currently had in athletic storage and what we felt we needed more. And at that time, which was still very, very early, there wasn't an answer on that one. And so I hope that, my hope in bringing these questions up now is that as we move forward, those types of details of, why are we building the size? I know we've changed the size for financial reasons as well as other, you're refining the process, and I understand that. But again, if we can provide that sort of information, I think that would be helpful, and I think having it all in one place would be really great. Thank you.
I could also add that if that does end up happening, this idea with the website, which I think is a good idea too, that any sustainable practices that are being implemented in the construction, or if that's highlighted, that's actually really helpful. For example, like to Pam Adams, I know she's contacted Amber about what are different things the district is doing, and it's helpful to get that information out to the public because the community does care a lot about those issues. And then it would be obvious if it were included and highlighted.
Sure.
So there is a section on the website that says upcoming projects, and the physical plant drawings are on there.
Fantastic.
Now, I'm not a web developer, so it leaves something to be desired, I will admit. So we are working through that. And Gretchen, your comment about sustainability, we are working through actually currently updating our Energy Star scores, which we will then repost because they were last posted, I think, in 2013.
Lucky for us, we have a job role that includes web development and all that stuff.
He's already been given direction.
Great.
Were those, the Energy Star were for all the buildings or just?
Correct.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Other questions on this? All right. Moving forward to the solar power purchasing agreement update, attachment
right.
7E.
Yeah, so, Randy, are you gonna
I am.
project this? That's great. Okay. So, once we get that up, before I begin, as always, I want to thank Randy for being the lead on our project management team that has handled the request for proposal process with the energy services consultant headed Green Sky, headed by Greg Shively. I also want to thank Ms. Brandt for being on the working group and the project management team and the other members of the project management team from the COG, Patton Township, State College Borough Water Authority, CATA, and the county, John Franek at the county. So it's been thorough. We meet every week on Wednesday morning.
And sometimes more.
And sometimes more. So there's been a lot of work put into this, and we're really very grateful. So there we are, the initial iteration of the group. And so the last time that we did this, we were not where we are right now. We were somewhere between aligning on desired project details and here, and we are very, very far along. And if you want to go to the next slide, Randy. So one of the things that is really pretty exciting about where we are as a country is the amount of renewable energy development that is happening in local governments. Obviously, if you look at that map, there are some places in the country where it's not surprising there are a lot of renewable energy developments because of the amount of sunlight or the amount of wind that is possible. Most of these have been on-site solar developments, so things, not so different from our own rooftop installations. But the second largest number there are these off-site physical power purchase agreements, and then moving down we have fewer. The thing that we have been looking at has been a virtual power purchase agreement, something that wouldn't be co-located with a piece of property that we have, but our project would show up on this map. So we are indeed part of a trend, and in Pennsylvania, a leading part of a trend. Okay, so if you want to go on to the next. So what we'll do here is just review some of the why, the who, and then get a little bit more into the what and the how. So these are the guiding principles that we established as a working group. This was done in consultation with all of the local governments who are participating in the solar working group. It's hard to believe that was initially formed over 3 years ago. And this was one of the very first things that we came into agreement on and became part of the motivating principles behind the working group. And just so that members of the public know, we are, there is to reduce costs and to engage more competitive rates. And then following that are to mitigate exposure to budget volatility because of the nature of these purchases. They provide a consistent, predictable electricity rate, and then also following that to contribute to global efforts and local efforts to mitigate or deal with the impacts of climate change, the risks of climate change and prevent greenhouse gas emissions. And there are more after that. I will say that letter E, I think, is of particular mission orientation for the district to educate folks, including our own students. So let's move on. So one of the things that comes up really frequently is, well, why would you do this in the first place? And if you look at the graph on the left, which begins in 2009 and then ends with 2021, you see a massive, massive reduction in the price of solar per megawatt hour. So in 2009, it was around an average of $350 a megawatt hour, and now we're somewhere around 35 in the unsubsidized cost of solar electricity. So that's just it's 1/10 of what it cost 13 years ago, 12 years ago. So we're also looking at, on the graph on the right, the amount of installed solar is going up a lot. That obviously impacts the price also. Next slide, Randy. So looking at all of that, we formed this working group. It is 15 local government entities, the school district, 6 authorities, 6 municipalities, a council of governments, and the county government. And I already addressed the project management team. So moving on, this is what's happened recently. We put out the request for proposals to solicit quotes. And then by October 19th, we had received 4 responses. 3 of them are from solar developers and 1 from a retail services provider. There were 9 solar project options, and 1 from a retail developer. The solar term options that we were provided are for 15 and 25 years. Then on November 21st and 22nd, we did interview 2 solar developers and a retail services provider, and we were able to ask a number of questions. I think a number of people on those calls were sort of, we had never done so much solar in one day. So it's, we have, at the end of the day, right, the 2 solar developers provided us with 6 projects. 2 are in Greene County, Pennsylvania, 3 are in Center County, and 1 is in Clarion County. So let's move on to the next slide. So the way that a traditional or a standard electricity bill looks from our retail contract that we have right now, it looks more or less like that thing on the right where we get a kilowatt hour reading. We get to know what our on-peak load is, right? With the peak, the price of electricity is higher, right? Comes off. So we get to know that. Then how much that costs, what the distribution costs are, any other ancillary costs that are included, we get a bill. So what we would be looking at coming forward, right, is so the solar project, right, generates the amount of electricity that it generates. Okay, so in March and in July, those numbers are different. That's important to know. There's a fixed solar rate, right? However many cents per kilowatt hour, however many dollars per megawatt hour, right? And then we have the reading of our own electricity in total. How much is that on the peak? How much of that is off the peak? And those matter because of the way that solar behaves during the day and during the year, right? So then we have our energy supply, like off the standard grid, and then we're going to have the settlement of the solar into that bill. And so there are times of the year when it's going to be very, 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 very productive. We're going to be like, wow, look at that credit. And then there are times of the year when it's less. And we'll be like, there's not as much there. And all of that, those are in a sort of addition and subtraction game over the course of the year. Do you think that's a fair thing to say? Mm-hmm. Right? Okay.
I mean, it's also dependent upon it depends if it's settled in Greene County and purchased in Center County, or if it's settled in Center County and purchased in Center County.
Yes.
That's a whole lot more level of detail.
Right. And so,
Is there an advantage?
yes, there is, and there is a slight price difference whether it is settled at a node that is away from us versus if that is settled close to us. And there is a price differential. There's a price difference there.
It's all the factors of
Right?
negotiating right now.
And those are all at play in the factors of the negotiation with those developers right now.
I see.
Right? Is it a massive difference? No. Does it matter? Yes, absolutely. Because it's going to impact the price and also the risk that we're being exposed to. Okay? And then the management of that power purchase, a retail provider is going to say, okay, well, we are going to take care of that so that there's not, so we are going to manage that for you. And that is also a reduction of risk for us, but it's something that you have to pay for. Okay. Then there are distribution costs and whatever those other ancillary costs are. So the things that are different come from the solar production, how it settles, and then its management. We can go to the next slide. So,
Yeah, I'm not sure what the difference is here.
I think the next slide is going to show. So that just shows that usage versus generation over the year, right? So it's just a mock-up of how that would work, so that what I was talking about, how that annual production would work out, is modeled there. So, what we've been working on is to, we obviously want to purchase the solar at or below the wholesale grid supply, understand and minimize risks. I'm just going to read this. Provide an example of what that new bill will look like. So we did a rough version of what that would look like. It's important to know that each entity, so Patton Township, State College Borough, County, us, would each have separate agreements, which will manage both that solar and the grid supply. And that can be negotiated so that as electricity contracts among the group sunset, they can be brought on. That's not really, we don't see that as a risk at all. So, and that's been stated
You're just
by
kind of layering things.
yeah, you're just sort of lining folks up so that they say, okay, well, our electricity contract is going to end in, September of 2024. And well, ours is going to be in March of 2024. And so just making sure that those can get slotted in. And that's not really a difficulty, but that's been a primary concern that's been stated. The solar installation or the start dates appear right now to be between fall 2024 or even off into 2026. And there are a whole bunch of reasons for that, land development planning, where they are in the queue, et cetera, et cetera. So those things are well out of our control. But once a thing gets greenlit, it can move.
I'm sorry.
Randy and I can and Gretchen, and we can take questions. I think the next thing that we're going to need to do is decide what we do with the renewable energy certificates. And I think that we need to do that in a work session in the next 5 to 6 weeks. So if we want to do that early in the new year, I think that would work, because we have other things that we're working on. We don't want to stack up before the holiday break, because I know that we already have a lot. But happy to take questions here, because our decision time is coming up, that next slide. We would like to have this approved and finalized by February 14th, which is even pushed back from the last date that we had projected.
So was it surprising that these were Pennsylvania arrays?
Who, are you asking me? No.
Okay.
No, based on previous experience and what I had seen in out in the grid, I was not surprised.
Okay. Questions?
I think when we talked about our preferred length of the solar contract, we
Mhm.
had hoped there might be an option of a shorter commitment.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to talk a little bit, or could you talk a little bit about, like, 15 years is a long time,
Mhm.
25 years is a long time.
Mhm.
I'm still not quite sure I'm understanding some of what's going on there, because, I mean, I feel like we were talking about committing to buying a certain quantity of electricity
Mhm.
through our solar. But if we have to commit to that for 15 years,
Mhm.
projecting out
Mm-hmm.
15 years from now what our electricity needs will be, that's a big ask. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, were you surprised when they didn't come in with anything shorter? Should we be concerned that we don't have an option of a shorter solar PPA?
I would not be concerned. I'm totally unsurprised. 5 years for an investment of this scale for a developer, that's like, right? So they're looking for for the long-term investment on the other side, right? Because up front, they're making up, right? Costs. So that 5 year.
I can add to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I remember Greg Shively saying in one of the project management team calls that I think he ended up coming to the conclusion that anything less than a 15-year, no developer would be able to do, because it would not be possible financially for them. So that, if I understood that correctly, that's actually where that comes from, is simply what's feasible versus what's not. And even recently, he talked about the difference between a shorter-term traditional contract versus what we're talking about here. And you're right, it's long, because it's different. And all of the PPAs that are being accomplished right now are that. They're not less than 15 because it's not possible. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. Well, I could imagine committing to, it's going to affect the amount that we'll commit to, right? Because we don't want to buy more electricity than we're going to use. Right? But if someone was willing to say, like, we're committed to go with you for 25 years, but could we reevaluate the amount within some band after 10 years or something? Like, is that a possibility? Does that make sense? So that you're committing to have the longer term contract.
Question makes
but
sense. The answer is not possible.
Not possible.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Which is, so and I think that's part of the game that, and I don't mean like game like it's a sneaky, nefarious game or something like that, but it is.
Negotiation,
Right.
But
Well,
the
I mean,
decision.
we're making a decision. And so like, we're kind of hedging
Right.
in different directions and trying to do it at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. And so what's a smart hedge? In this case, right? Because if we want to have really aggressive energy efficiency
Can you use the word
measures-
decision and not hedge?
Oh, okay. I don't mean like a hedge fund. Okay. We are managing our risk. We are making a decision to manage our risk. How's that?
Thank you.
Okay, we are making a decision to manage our risk, against some price volatility, right? And what seems like a smart thing to do. And yeah, I mean, we're going to have to make that. exactly.
But I think you'd bring up a good point, kind of related to what Peter mentioned earlier about our bandwidth that we had discussed months ago.
Yep.
Not in this room, but when we were meeting at Memorial Field. And because over that 15-year period, how much more efficient will light bulbs and light fixtures and HVAC systems and different things like that, all things that take electricity, become so that our electric usage and needs could decline significantly. I mean, I think that is part of this decision.
Unless we had electric buses and electric mowers and electric. But that's the gamble.
That is beyond my livelihood.
I will say though that I think that Dr. Bader brings up a really good, really important point and regarding electric buses, because the electrification of buses, which is definitely coming.
It's on the horizon.
It
It's
is
just how
right there,
long-
and there's
how
money for
long is that
districts, right? Exactly,
horizon?
and that's a transmission issue, right? And that will have a really significant impact on that portion of the bill, of our energy bill, right? And diesel,
Absolutely.
right, is going to go away, and then here comes electricity. Yeah.
No, it's very true fact. It's just, I don't think that it's concrete enough to be able to factor into this decision.
We will talk about that on a future agenda under the facilities and grounds portion, because I think that that's a really important thing. But yeah. And Debbie, did we deal with your question?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I mean, I didn't actually think you were going to be able to give me a desired answer or even right? Like, it's just pointing out the uncertainties. And so if everyone hasn't already thought about those, these are the things we need to be thinking about.
Clearly, there's factors that could increase and factors that could decrease our electric use.
Exactly.
And we don't know where that.
Right.
Yeah.
But the longer the term, the more risk averse I am about committing to a very large portion of our energy usage. So, yeah.
Yep. This is like
And
a
we'll have to
conversation
look
that
at what
Randy
that
and I have.
kilowatt hour cost, but then you're going to balance that versus the price you're locking in.
Right.
So. All right. Yes, Laura?
This just occurred to me, may not make sense. If we were to buy more than we needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can we do anything with the excess? Like, can we sell it further? I mean, or is it just, it's gone?
Yeah, I mean, that's, you go into a contract for a certain amount in the agreement, and
You're
And
buying.
it's to us.
and
You
and you're
can't-
buying it. I mean, it settles in interesting ways, which can actually kind of play with the price in a way, but you can't get out of
You
that.
can't subcontract type of
No,
thing.
no, no.
Or,
no.
what's
We're
the
not an
term?
energy authority, right?
Okay, I just, it occurred to me and I figured I'd ask.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Okay.
No, thank you very much. It was a very, very thoughtful, very thought-provoking, substantive review. Thank you.
Yeah. Fun.
All righty. So moving on to board committee reports. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Randy.
Thanks, Randy.
We had a Culture, Climate, and Learning Committee meeting.
We did.
Anything
There- a number-
beyond what's on the minutes?
Number of
Yeah.
topics that were on this evening's agenda, and among the question about the academic calendar was one of the items. We also discussed a couple of the ESL budget requests for the talking points and elevation software items that we reviewed this evening. There also on the agenda for the meeting, there was a review of a schedule for bringing forward different forms of district-wide assessment results at different times of the year based on their availability. So depending upon the availability of MAP assessment results or PSSA results or the BASC screening, those kinds of things would be available at certain times, and there'd be a set schedule for that we could anticipate. So that was presented. We also had an update on the MAP student assessment results that really essentially showed that there was a significant drop in the MAP student assessments in reading and math during the height of the COVID infection period. But since then, students have recovered somewhat. So the performance of students on the MAP assessments has not quite come back to pre-COVID or pre-COVID levels, but there's been some substantial improvements in terms of MAP assessment results. Another piece of information, another portion of the agenda also addressed the needs of students where English, they're considered English language learners, and incorporated in that was a presentation by Ms. Alex Croswell, who serves as through the use of the ARP funding, has developed a role in the school district as a bilingual educator and family liaison, and just a very comprehensive and exciting presentation. Talked about all the needs of students in the school district who for whom English is not their family's first language, and when there are significant cultural and differences that exist in their families, and the importance of an individual like that, such as Ms. Croswell, in terms of her facility with Spanish, actually, and her capacity to be able to communicate with these families and begin to wrap our minds around the needs of these families that we wouldn't otherwise have been made aware. That was a really, really powerful presentation. And that is available, her presentation is available, is on the Board Docs website for that particular meeting, the most recent CCL meeting. There was also a research proposal presented by Ms. Katie Bateman. She's a program manager with Youth Engineering Solutions, a curriculum development project and initiative at Penn State, under the supervision of Christine Cunningham, who is her supervisor for this research. It's a doctoral level, some doctoral level research, which will basically provide an opportunity for there to be a record, if you will, or a documentation and recording of the lessons that are part of this curriculum, this essentially a STEM curriculum that would be available not just to us to have as examples for our own teaching staff, but also for others who are engaged with the Youth Engineering Solutions curriculum development process in other school districts. It was a pretty productive meeting. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dan. So we have a finance and audit meeting here on the 14th at 12:45 in this room, and you can see upcoming agenda items for the 19th when we have our next regular meeting, including we would be bringing the academic calendar for a vote at that time. So with that, I'd like a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, we are adjourned.